Betrayed black woman rushes into marriage with a stranger only to find out he's a billionaire tycoon. Welcome back to Mr. Roman's Story Vault. If you're just joining us, stop right here. You need to watch part 1 first. The link is in the description and in the card above. Trust me, you don't want to miss how Imani and Declan's story began. It's a journey you need to experience from the start. For everyone who watched part 1, welcome back. You've been waiting for this. The apartment door swung open, and Imani stepped into a scene that would be forever burned into her memory. Declan sat on their second-hand couch, the same couch where they'd eaten countless meals, watched movies on her laptop, talked until dawn about their dreams. His head was in his hands, his shoulders hunched forward in a posture of complete defeat. He looked up when she entered, and his face told her everything she needed to know. "You know," he said quietly. Not a question, a statement of fact. "You're damn right I know." Imani's voice came out cold, controlled, which somehow felt more dangerous than screaming. "Patricia Holbrook called me. Your executive assistant, the one you've had for 7 years. Declan stood slowly, like a man approaching a wild animal. "Imani, please let me explain." "Explain what, exactly?" The control shattered, and her voice rose. "Explain how you've been lying to me since the day we met." "I never lied to you," Declan said, and there was desperation in his tone. "I never once lied. You let me believe you were someone you're not." Imani threw her purse onto the floor. "You watched me budget our groceries. You split $40 bills with me. You moved into this—" She gestured around the cramped studio. "This apartment like someone who had no other choice. Meanwhile, you're worth billions." "Billions, Declan. I know how it looks." "How it looks?" Imani's laugh was sharp, bitter. "I've been clipping coupons. I picked up extra shifts last month so we could afford to fix my car. And you could probably buy the entire dealership without checking your bank account." "The money doesn't matter," Declan insisted, stepping closer. "Don't you dare tell me it doesn't matter." Imani backed away from him. "You don't get to decide what matters to me. You don't get to make choices about my life based on information you're hiding." "I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing," Imani shouted. "Lying by omission is still lying, Declan. Or should I call you Mr. Frost, CEO of Frost Industries, billionaire tech mogul?" Declan flinched like she'd struck him. "That's not who I am. That's what I have, what I was born into, what everyone expects me to be. But it's not me." "Then, are you?" Imani demanded. "Because right now, I have no idea. The man I married works freelance consulting and owns 3 shirts. The man I just discovered online wears $1,000 suits to charity galas and shakes hands with senators." "I'm the same person," Declan said, his voice cracking. "Imani, I'm the same person who's held you when you couldn't sleep, who helped you practice your presentation, who makes your coffee exactly how you like it. That's real. All of it was real. Except the part where you told me the truth about who you are. I did tell you the truth." Declan ran his hands through his hair, frustration and anguish warring on his face. "I told you I walked away from my family business. I told you I was trying to figure out who I am without expectations. I told you everything that mattered. You left out the part where your family business is a multi-billion-dollar empire." Imani's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "You left out the part where you're one of the wealthiest men in the country. Those feel like pretty significant details, Declan." "Because I knew this would happen." Declan's own voice rose now. "I knew that the second you found out about the money, everything would change. You'd start questioning whether anything between us was real. You'd wonder if I had ulterior motives. I'm questioning everything now anyway." Imani interrupted. "You think keeping it secret protected what we had? It destroyed it. Because now I have to wonder what else you're hiding. What else you've decided I don't need to know." Declan moved closer, and this time Imani didn't back away. "I should have told you sooner. I know that. But Imani, do you have any idea what it's like to never know if people want you or what you can give them? I've had friends who only called when they needed money, relationships where I was a bank account with a pulse. Every single person in my life has had an agenda related to my wealth. So you tested me? Imani asked, her voice dropping to something deadly quiet. This was some kind of social experiment? See if the girl from the dating app would marry you without knowing you're rich? No, Declan said fiercely. It wasn't like that. When I met you, you were the first person in years who saw me. Just me. Not my last name, not my company, not what I could do for them. You talked to me like a human being. You shared real things. You were authentic. And I was terrified of losing that. So you lied. I omitted, Declan corrected desperately. And yes, before you say it again, I know that's not much better. But Imani, every time I tried to tell you, I got scared. Scared you'd leave. Scared you'd change. Scared I'd lose the only real thing I've had in a decade. Imani wiped at her eyes angrily. You don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide what information I need to make decisions about my own life. I married you, Declan. I made vows. I committed to building a life with you. And the whole time, you were keeping this massive secret. You're right. Declan's voice broke. You're absolutely right. I was selfish. I was wrong. I was so afraid of being hurt again that I hurt you instead. And I'm so sorry. The apology hung in the air between them. But it wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough. I need time, Imani said finally, her voice hollow. I need to think. Whatever you need, Declan replied immediately. But please, Imani, please no. Everything else was real. My feelings for you, the life we've been building, the man I am when I'm with you, that's all real. I don't know what's real anymore, Imani said quietly. She walked to their shared closet. God, they'd been sharing a closet for 6 weeks while he was sitting on billions, and grabbed clothes, shoving them into an overnight bag without really seeing what she was taking. Declan stood frozen, watching her pack, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. At the door, Imani paused. How long were you planning to keep this from me? I don't know, Declan admitted. I kept telling myself I'd find the right moment, the right way to tell you. But there never seemed to be a right time. There were 1,000 right times, Imani said. Before you proposed. Before we got married. Any point in the last 6 weeks. You just chose not to take them. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Somehow, that quiet click felt more final than slamming it would have. Zara opened her door at 6:30 that evening, took one look at Imani's face, and pulled her inside without a word. He's a billionaire, Imani said flatly, standing in Zara's entryway. My husband is a billionaire, and he never told me. I'm sorry, what? The whole story came pouring out. The phone call from Patricia, the Google search, the photos and articles, the confrontation. Zara listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to anger to something more complicated. So let me get this straight, Zara said when Imani finally ran out of words. You married a man you barely knew, and now you're upset because you didn't know everything about him. Imani stared at her best friend. Whose side are you on? Yours. Always yours. Zara guided her to the couch. But honey, I love you too much not to be honest. You rushed into this marriage for the wrong reasons. You were running from Marcus, not running toward Declan. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, it doesn't. Zara agreed. He absolutely should have told you. That was wrong, and you have every right to be angry. But Imani, if he had told you on day one that he was a billionaire, would you have trusted it? Would you have believed his interest in you was genuine? Imani opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Because Zara was right. If Declan had revealed his wealth from the beginning, Imani would have run in the opposite direction. She would have assumed he was playing games, slumming it with regular people for entertainment, looking for some kind of arrangement rather than a real relationship. She would have protected her already broken heart by never giving him a chance. That's what I thought, Zara said softly, reading Imani's silence correctly. So yes, he was wrong to keep it from you for 6 weeks. But would honesty from the start have led anywhere good either? I don't know, Imani whispered. Look, Zara continued, I was skeptical about this whole thing from the beginning. You know I was. But Manny, I've seen you these past 6 weeks. You've been happier than I've seen you in years, maybe happier than you were even in the early days with Marcus, because I thought I was building something real. Were you, though? Or were you building something real, and he just happened to have money you didn't know about? Imani spent that night in Zara's guest room, unable to sleep, her mind replaying everything. The second day, the anger continued burning hot. She found herself composing and deleting texts to Declan, wanting to scream at him, wanting answers, She didn't know what she wanted. Zara let her rage, nodding in the right places, offering ice cream and solidarity. But on the third day, something shifted. Imani woke early, before dawn, and found herself doing something she hadn't done in months. She prayed. Not for answers, but for clarity. For the ability to see past her hurt to what was actually true. And in the quiet of that morning, she began replaying memories with new context. Declan encouraging her to pursue the promotion, even though it meant more hours away from him. Marcus had made her feel guilty for career success. Declan celebrated it. Declan listening, really listening, when she talked about her dreams of starting her own firm. Marcus had dismissed her ambitions as unrealistic. Declan had asked follow-up questions, helped her brainstorm, treated her dreams as valid. Declan holding her when she'd gotten the call about her mother's health scare, staying up with her while she cried and worried. Marcus had told her she was being dramatic when her mother had surgery last year. Declan making her laugh at midnight, making her coffee exactly how she liked. Remembering small details about her preferences and fears and hopes. Yes, he'd kept the money secret, but he'd been honest about everything else that mattered. His feelings, his struggles with family expectations, his desire to be seen for himself rather than his circumstances. Marcus had lied about his feelings, his commitment, his fidelity. Those were lies about who he was at his core. Declan had withheld information about what he had, but he'd been truthful about who he was. It wasn't the same thing. It still hurt. It was still a betrayal of trust. But it wasn't the same thing. I think I need to go home, Imani told Zara on the afternoon of the third day. To yell at him some more, or to actually talk. To actually talk, Imani said. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. But Zara, he's my husband, and I made a commitment. I can't just run away without at least trying to figure out if this is fixable. Now that sounds like the Imani I know, Zara said, hugging her tight. The one who does the hard work instead of taking the easy way out. As Imani packed her overnight bag, she realized something crucial. She married Declan impulsively, recklessly, for all the wrong reasons. But maybe, just maybe, she could choose to stay for the right ones. If he was willing to do the work, if they could rebuild what his secret had damaged, if honesty could create a stronger foundation than the one that had just crumbled. Only one way to find out. Imani returned home on the fourth day, her heart pounding as she climbed the familiar stairs to their apartment. She'd texted Declan that morning, just 4 words, coming home, we'll talk. His response had been immediate, I'll be here. When she unlocked the door and stepped inside, the first thing she noticed was how immaculate everything looked. The studio apartment, already small, gleamed with cleanliness. Every surface had been scrubbed, dishes put away, their bed made with hospital corners she'd never seen Declan attempt before. And there were flowers. Not the wildflowers he'd picked from random gardens during their first weeks together. These were clearly expensive. A massive arrangement of roses, lilies, and orchids sat on their small dining table, the kind of bouquet that cost more than their weekly grocery budget. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Declan stood by the window, and Imani's breath caught at the sight of him. He looked wrecked. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them, if he'd slept at all. His hair stuck up at odd angles, and his usual warm expression was replaced by something raw and uncertain. Hi, he said quietly. Hi, Imani replied, setting her bag down by the door. They stood there for a long moment, the 3 days of separation stretching between them like a canyon. I wasn't sure if you'd come back, Declan admitted. I wasn't sure either, Imani said honestly, but we need to talk, really talk. No omissions, no carefully chosen words, just complete honesty. Whatever you need. Imani moved to the small dining table, noting the expensive flowers that now served as a physical reminder of the wealth gap she hadn't known existed. She sat down in one chair, and Declan took the seat across from her, their knees almost touching in the cramped space. "I've spent the last 3 days being angry," Imani began, her hands folded on the table. "And I had every right to be. You kept something massive from me, Declan. You let me make decisions about our life together without complete information. That wasn't fair, and it wasn't honest, even if you never technically lied." Declan nodded, not interrupting, just listening. "But I've also been thinking about why I married you in the first place," Imani continued. "And I have to be honest, I wasn't making the best decision for the best reasons." Declan's eyes widened slightly, but he remained quiet. "I was hurt and reckless and trying to prove something to myself," Imani said, the admission difficult but necessary. "Maybe trying to prove something to Marcus, even though he didn't deserve that power over me. I was running from pain instead of running towards something real. I married you after knowing you for 9 days, Declan. That's not the action of someone thinking clearly." "I know," Declan said softly. "I knew that when I asked you to marry me. I could see it. Then why did you ask?" Declan leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Because I was being just as reckless. I saw someone beautiful and real and hurt, and I wanted to be the person who helped you heal. I wanted to matter to someone for the right reasons instead of the wrong ones. I wanted to prove to myself that I could have something genuine, something that existed outside the world of wealth and expectations. So we're quite a pair," Imani said with a sad smile. "Two broken people making impulsive decisions. Does it have to stay broken?" Declan asked, and there was such naked hope in his voice that it made Imani's chest ache. She took a deep breath. "I don't know. That depends on whether we're willing to do the actual work of building something real. Not the fantasy we rushed into, but a genuine partnership based on complete honesty." "Tell me how," Declan said, leaning forward intently. "Tell me what you need, and I'll do it." Imani had spent the last 3 days thinking about exactly this. "First, I need complete transparency about everything. Your business, your family, your wealth, your past, your present. I need to know who I actually married, not the edited version you thought I could handle." "Done," Declan agreed immediately. "What else?" "Second, we need counseling. Professional help from someone who can guide us through this objectively. We need to figure out if what we have is real, or if we both just got caught up in the romance of rebelling against our circumstances." "I'll find us the best therapist in Atlanta," Declan promised. "Not the most expensive," Imani corrected gently. "The best. There's a difference, and I need you to understand that." Declan paused, then nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm sorry. Old habits. Which brings me to the third thing," Imani said. "I need you to understand that your money changes things, whether we want it to or not. There's a massive power imbalance in this relationship now that I know the truth. I need to figure out how to be an equal partner when there's such an enormous difference in our financial situations. Your worth isn't determined by your bank account," Declan said firmly. "You're not less than me because I have money." "I know that intellectually," Imani replied. "But knowing it and feeling it are different things. And I need time to process how to navigate this. I can't just pretend the wealth doesn't exist, but I also refuse to become dependent on it." "What would that look like practically?" Declan asked. Imani had thought about this too. "I don't know yet. That's part of what we'll need to figure out together. But I know I need to maintain my own financial independence. I need to keep building my career on my own merit. I can't become someone who exists in your shadow. I would never want that," Declan said. "Imani, your drive and ambition are part of what drew me to you. I don't want to diminish that." "Then prove it," Imani challenged. "Show me through actions, not just words. Because right now, I'm having trouble trusting words." Declan flinched, but he didn't argue. "That's fair. What else do you need from me?" "I need you to hear this clearly," Imani said, her voice steady and strong. "I'm not staying because you're rich. In fact, that makes me want to run. The money complicates everything. I'm only willing to try to make this work because of who you've been to me these past 6 weeks, the man who listens, the man who encourages my dreams, the man who makes me feel seen. That's the man I might be able to build something with. That's the man I want to be, Declan said, emotion thick in his throat. With or without the money, with or without the company, that's who I want to be. Then we need to start over, Imani said. Not completely. We can't erase what's happened, but we can start building something real, with both of us fully present and fully honest. I'd like that, Declan said quietly. More than anything. It's not going to be easy, Imani warned. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. There are going to be days when I don't trust you, when I question everything, when I wonder if staying was the right choice. I understand, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be patient while I work through this. You don't get to rush my healing because it makes you uncomfortable. I won't, Declan promised. I'll give you whatever time you need. Imani studied him across the table, this man who was both the person she'd fallen for and a stranger she was just beginning to know. Tell me something true right now. Something you haven't told me before. Declan thought for a moment, then spoke carefully. I've been terrified every single day since we got married that you'd realize you made a mistake. Not because of the money, you didn't know about that, but because I could see how much pain you were in when we met, and I was. Afraid that once you healed, you wouldn't need me anymore. The secret about my wealth wasn't just about protecting myself from being wanted for my money. It was about protecting myself from being left when I wasn't useful anymore. The vulnerability in his admission cracked something open in Imani's chest. I'm terrified too, she confessed. I'm terrified that I can't trust my own judgment anymore. Marcus destroyed my confidence in reading people, in knowing what's real. And now this, finding out you're not who I thought you were, it makes me question everything. How do I know what we have is genuine? How do I know I'm not being fooled again? You don't, Declan said simply. Neither of us knows for certain. That's the risk of trying. That's a terrible answer, Imani said, but she was almost smiling. It's an honest one, Declan replied, which is what you asked for. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything spoken and unspoken hanging between them. I want to try, Imani finally said. I want to see if we can build something real from this mess. But Declan, I need you to understand. This is your one chance. If you keep anything else from me, if I find out there are more secrets you've decided I don't need to know, I'm done. No second chances, no explanations, just done. I understand, Declan said seriously. Complete transparency from this point forward. I promise you. Then let's start now, Imani said. Tell me about Frost Industries. Tell me about your family. Tell me the things you've been keeping from me. And he did. For the next 3 hours, they sat at that small table, and Declan told her everything. About his father, Richard Frost, who'd built a technology empire from nothing and expected his son to guard it like a sacred trust. About his mother, Margaret, who loved him but struggled to understand why he'd walk away from such success. About the pressure of being a CEO before age 30, of making decisions that affected thousands of employees, of living in a world where everyone wanted something from him. He told her about the loneliness of wealth, how every relationship felt transactional, how he'd learned to distrust kindness because it so often came with an agenda. He told her about the moment he'd decided to step away, how he'd felt like he was suffocating under the weight of expectations, how he'd needed to find out who he was when stripped of all the external markers of success. And Imani listened, really listened, beginning to understand the man she'd married in ways she hadn't before. My turn, she said when he finished. What do you want to know about me? Everything, Declan said. Tell me about your family, your childhood, your dreams before Marcus convinced you to shrink them. So Imani shared about growing up in North Carolina, about her sister Nia who'd always been braver, about her mother's quiet strength, and her father who'd passed when she was 15, about the career she'd wanted before settling for the safer path, about the version of herself she'd lost while trying to be perfect for someone who didn't deserve her effort. They talked until the afternoon light faded into evening, until they'd ordered takeout. and eaten it cold because they were too engaged in conversation to pause. And somewhere in those hours, something shifted. The hurt didn't disappear. The breach of trust didn't magically heal. But they began building something new, a foundation constructed from honesty instead of omission, from choice instead of impulse. When darkness fell completely outside their window, Declan reached across the table and offered his hand. Imani looked at it for a long moment, then placed her hand in his. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning, a real one this time. If this story is touching your heart, if you see yourself in their struggle, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. These stories matter. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need hope. Now, let's see how Imani and Declan navigate the hardest part of their journey. The next several months were harder than either of them had anticipated. Therapy started the following week. Dr. Michelle Chen was a no-nonsense marriage counselor in her 50s, who specialized in couples navigating significant breaches of trust. She worked out of a modest office in Buckhead, and from the first session, she made it clear she wouldn't tolerate deflection or surface-level conversation. "Let's start with why you're here," Dr. Chen said, looking between them. "My husband lied to me about being a billionaire," Imani said flatly. "I omitted information about my financial situation," Declan corrected. Dr. Chen held up a hand. "We're going to spend a lot of time unpacking that distinction. But first, I want to understand something else. You two have known each other for how long?" "About 3 months total," Imani admitted. "We got married after 9 days. Dr. Chen didn't even blink. So we're not just dealing with a trust issue, we're dealing with two people who made a life-altering decision while essentially being strangers. Is that accurate?" The blunt assessment stung, but neither of them could argue. "Yes," Declan said quietly. "Then let's figure out if what you built in that short time was real, or if you were both running from something," Dr. Chen said, opening her notebook. "Imani, let's start with you. What were you running from?" The question cracked Imani open. Over the following sessions, she found herself confronting truths she'd been avoiding. She talked about Marcus's betrayal, about how it had made her feel worthless and foolish, about how marrying Declan had been an act of rebellion against the careful, sensible version of herself who'd been burned. "I was willing to sabotage my own happiness to avoid being vulnerable again," Imani admitted during their 4th session. "If I married someone impulsively, someone I barely knew, then it couldn't hurt as much when it fell apart, because I never really invested. I never really opened myself up completely." "Except you did open up," Dr. Chen observed. "You married him." "I married the idea of recklessness," Imani said. "I'm not sure I married him." Sitting beside her, Declan absorbed this like a physical blow, but he had his own revelations to face. "I've spent my entire adult life isolated by wealth," Declan confessed during their 6th session. "Every friendship, every relationship, there was always this question: do they want me or do they want what I can give them? I learned to distrust everyone. I built walls so high that I couldn't see over them anymore." "So when you met Imani, you saw an opportunity," Dr. Chen said. "I saw someone real," Declan corrected. "But yes, I also saw an opportunity to find out if someone could want me without knowing about the money. And that was selfish. I was using the situation to answer my own questions without considering that she deserved to ask her own questions with complete information." "At least you're being honest now," Imani said quietly. They did the work, even when it was uncomfortable. Even when sessions left them both emotionally drained, they kept showing up. Dr. Chen gave them assignments, writing exercises about their expectations, communication practices, scheduled check-ins about feelings. It felt clinical and awkward at first, but slowly they began learning how to actually talk to each other instead of around each other. "Rebuilding trust is like physical therapy," Dr. Chen told them. "It's repetitive, sometimes painful, and progress isn't linear. But consistency creates strength." As part of the transparency Imani had demanded, Declan began introducing her to his world. The first introduction was Patricia Holbrook, whose phone call had shattered Imani's illusions. They met at a coffee shop in Midtown, neutral territory that didn't feel weighted with corporate formality. Patricia was an elegant woman in her mid-50s, with sharp eyes, that assessed Imani carefully as they shook hands. "Mrs. Frost," Patricia said, "I apologize for the way you found out about your husband's position. Had I known the situation, I would have handled it differently." "It's not your fault," Imani replied, sitting down. "You were just doing your job." They talked for over an hour. Patricia had been with Frost Industries for nearly a decade, had watched Declan grow from an uncertain young executive into a capable leader. She'd also watched him struggle under the weight of expectations. "He's been through a lot," Patricia said, stirring her tea. "People have used him, manipulated him. When he told me he'd gotten married to someone he barely knew, I thought it was another disaster waiting to happen. Another person who'd seen an opportunity." "And now?" Imani asked. Patricia's expression softened. "Now I see how he looks at you. I've known Declan for 7 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not at his wealth, not at what he can do for you, but at him. That's rare in his world. Actually, it's nearly impossible." The conversation stayed with Imani for days afterward. Meeting Declan's family was more daunting. His father, Richard Frost, was a stern man in his late 60s who built Frost Industries from a small startup into a global empire. He and Declan's mother, Margaret, invited them to dinner at the family estate, a sprawling property in North Atlanta that made Imani's stomach clench with anxiety. The house was exactly what she'd expected: enormous, immaculate, filled with expensive art and furniture that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Richard met them at the door, his handshake firm and assessing. "So, you're the woman who married my son after knowing him for 9 days, he said bluntly. "Dad," Declan started, but Imani touched his arm. "Yes, sir," she said calmly, meeting Richard's gaze directly. "I am. Why?" The question was a test. Imani could feel it. "Because I was broken and reckless, and he was offering me something that felt different," Imani answered honestly. "Not good reasons, I know. But I'm trying to turn an impulsive decision into something real." Richard studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "At least you're honest. Come in." Dinner was initially tense. Richard asked pointed questions about Imani's background, her career, her intentions. But Margaret, Declan's mother, was warmer, a woman in her early 60s with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that balanced her husband's intensity. Halfway through the meal, Richard set down his fork and looked directly at Imani. "You married him when you thought he was nobody," he stated. "I married him when I thought he was somebody without money," Imani corrected. "There's a difference." Richard's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good. He needs someone who sees him, not the company. God knows I put enough pressure on him to become someone he wasn't ready to be." The admission surprised both Imani and Declan. After dinner, Margaret pulled Imani aside while Richard and Declan talked in the study. "My son has always felt like he had to be someone else to be loved," Margaret said gently as they stood on the back terrace. "His father's successor, the brilliant CEO, the Frost heir. If you can love him for just being Declan, flawed, uncertain, human, Declan, then you'll have given him something money could never buy." "I'm trying," Imani said honestly, "but I'm still learning who Declan actually is." "So is he," Margaret replied with a sad smile. "That's what makes you good for each other. You're both figuring it out." The following month, it was Declan's turn to face scrutiny. Imani brought him home to North Carolina to meet her family. Her mother, Joyce, greeted them at the door of the modest house where Imani had grown up. She hugged Imani tight, then turned to Declan with an expression that could freeze lava. "So you're the billionaire my daughter married without telling anyone," Joyce said. "Mama," Imani started. "It's fine, baby. Let me talk to your husband." Joyce gestured Declan toward the kitchen. "Come on. You can help me finish dinner." Imani's sister Nia arrived an hour later, and her interrogation was even more direct. "Let me get this straight," Nia said, sitting across from Declan in the living room. "You let my sister think you were regular broke, watched her stress about money, and didn't think that was a problem?" "It was absolutely a problem," Declan agreed. And I was wrong. I'm working to rebuild the trust I damaged. You better be, Nia said sharply, because Imani is the best person I know. She gives everything to the people she loves. And if you're playing games with her— I'm not, Declan interrupted quietly. I love your sister, and I know I hurt her. I'm spending every day trying to prove that I can be the partner she deserves. Nia studied him for a long moment, then looked at Imani. You believe him? I'm trying to, Imani said. Over dinner, the atmosphere gradually thawed. Declan answered every question honestly, listening when Joyce shared stories about Imani's childhood, about the dreams she'd had before Marcus convinced her to set them aside. She wanted to start her own business, Joyce said, serving sweet potato pie, help black entrepreneurs build their brands. She had a whole plan, but Marcus said it was too risky. It's not too risky, Declan said, looking at Imani. It's brilliant. Later that night, lying in Imani's childhood bedroom, her mother had insisted on separate rooms. Billionaire husband or not, Imani stared at the ceiling and thought about her mother's words. She'd buried that dream when Marcus dismissed it, filed it away under impractical fantasies. But it wasn't impractical. It was exactly what she wanted. The next week, back in Atlanta, she brought it up in therapy. I want to start my own marketing firm, Imani said. Something focused on black-owned businesses, helping entrepreneurs who get overlooked by traditional agencies. That's wonderful, Dr. Chen said. What's stopping you? Fear, Imani admitted. And I guess I'm waiting for someone to tell me it's stupid. It's not stupid, Declan said immediately. It's exactly what you should do. I can help. Connections, advice, whatever you need. Not money, Imani said firmly, turning to him. This is something I need to build myself, with my own resources, my own effort. She watched Declan carefully, waiting for him to argue, to insist that using his wealth would be easier, faster, smarter. But he surprised her. Okay, he said simply. Then let me support you in other ways. I know people in the business community. I can make introductions, offer strategic advice, be your sounding board. Let me be your partner without being your investor. It was exactly the right thing to say. Dr. Chen smiled. That's growth, both of you respecting boundaries while offering support. Over the following weeks, Imani began building her business plan. She worked on it in the evenings after her regular job, researching, planning, reaching out to potential clients. Declan helped by reviewing her strategy, offering insights from his own business experience, and connecting her with mentors who could guide her. He never once offered money, and that restraint meant more to Imani than any check ever could. You're respecting my boundaries, she said one evening, as they worked side by side at their small table. I'm learning what partnership actually means, Declan replied. It's not about solving problems with money. It's about showing up and supporting however I'm needed. 3 months into therapy, Dr. Chen gave them an assignment: write letters to each other about what they'd learned. Imani wrote about learning to trust again, about distinguishing between Marcus's lies about character and Declan's omission about circumstances, about recognizing her own patterns of self-sabotage and choosing vulnerability despite the risk. Declan wrote about learning that real connection requires risk, that protecting yourself from being used also protects you from being loved, about understanding that Imani's worth wasn't something he needed to discover. It was inherent, regardless of what she knew about his bank account. They read the letters aloud in Dr. Chen's office, and both of them cried. You're doing the work, Dr. Chen said gently. The hard, unglamorous, necessary work of building something real. I'm proud of you both. Walking out of that session, Imani realized something had shifted. She was still healing, still building trust, still navigating the complexity of their situation. But for the first time since Patricia's phone call, she felt genuine hope that they could actually make this work. 6 months after the phone call that had nearly destroyed them, Imani and Declan stood on the front steps of a brownstone in Atlanta's historic Grant Park neighborhood, holding hands and staring at what would become their home. Not Declan's property from his extensive real estate portfolio, not Imani's cramped studio where they'd played house while secrets festered. This was something they'd chosen together. A 3-bedroom brownstone with original hardwood floors, a working fireplace, and a back porch that overlooked a garden badly in need of attention. "It needs work," the realtor had said apologetically during the showing. "It's perfect," Imani had replied, squeezing Declan's hand. Because it was theirs. A space they would build together, with both of them contributing equally to the down payment, Imani from her savings and Declan from an account he'd set up specifically for their shared expenses, carefully calibrated to match what she could contribute. The compromise had taken weeks to negotiate, multiple therapy sessions, and several arguments about what equality actually meant when one partner could buy the entire neighborhood without checking their account balance. "I need to contribute meaningfully," Imani had insisted. "Not some token amount while you carry everything." Real partnership. And Declan had listened, really listened. He'd worked with their financial advisor to create a structure where they both invested in their life together, proportionally, where Imani's contributions mattered, where the balance felt genuine rather than performative. Moving day was chaos and laughter. Zara showed up with coffee and commentary, directing traffic as movers hauled furniture up the front steps. Imani's sister Nia had driven down from Chicago with a truck full of housewares and unsolicited advice about everything from paint colors to prenuptial agreements. "It's a little late for a prenup," Imani had pointed out. "Never too late to protect yourself," Nia had replied, though she'd softened considerably toward Declan over the past months. By evening, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and furniture in various states of assembly, Imani stood in their new living room and felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Home. Not just a place to sleep, but a space that reflected both of them. Declan's minimalist aesthetic balanced with Imani's love. Of color and texture, his books mixed with hers on shelves they'd built together, their lives genuinely intertwined. The months that followed established rhythms that felt sustainable rather than performative. Declan had returned to Frost Industries, but on his own terms. Part-time consulting rather than full operational control, strategic guidance rather than daily firefighting. He'd installed new leadership, restructured the company to function without his constant presence, and set boundaries that his father had initially resisted but eventually respected. "I have a life outside this company," Declan had told Richard firmly during a tense board meeting. "And I'm not sacrificing it again." He worked from home 3 days a week, spent 2 days at the downtown office, and kept his evenings and weekends sacred for Imani and their marriage. Imani had launched Elevate Marketing, her firm focused on Black-owned businesses with 3 initial clients and a tiny office she shared with 2 other entrepreneurs. The work was harder than her corporate job, the hours longer, the financial uncertainty sometimes terrifying. But she'd never felt more alive. Declan had been true to his word. He made introductions, offered strategic advice, celebrated her victories, and commiserated with her setbacks. But he never wrote a check, never swooped in to solve problems with money, never diminished her accomplishment by making it easy. "You landed the Johnson account," he'd shouted when she'd called with the news of her biggest client yet, and his pride had been genuine and unrestrained. They still split household expenses down the middle. Groceries, utilities, dinners out, everything divided equally. It mattered to Imani, this tangible evidence that she was contributing, that she wasn't becoming dependent, that their partnership was balanced. Declan kept his wealth separate, using it for his own expenses and charitable foundations, but their shared life operated on a budget they both maintained. "This feels ridiculous to some people," Imani had admitted to Zara over lunch. "He could pay for everything 1,000 times over, but it doesn't feel ridiculous to you," Zara had observed. And that's what matters. They created traditions that anchored their weeks. Sunday mornings meant breakfast in bed, Declan's specialty of French toast and fresh fruit, served on a tray with coffee, made exactly how Imani liked it. They'd stay there for hours, talking about the week ahead, reading articles aloud to each other, existing in comfortable intimacy. Evening walks through their neighborhood became sacred time. After dinner, they'd wander the tree-lined streets of Grant Park, holding hands, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they'd discuss serious things, business challenges, family dynamics, fears about the future. Other times, they'd debate ridiculous topics like whether hot dogs were sandwiches or rank their favorite cereals from childhood. "This is my favorite part of the day," Imani had confessed during one of these walks. "Just walking," Declan had asked. "Just being with you. No agenda, no performance. Just us." Monthly date nights required more planning. They took turns choosing the activity, with a rule that it couldn't be something they'd done before. Imani had taken Declan to a pottery class where they'd both been terrible and laughed until their stomachs hurt. Declan had surprised Imani with tickets to a spoken-word poetry event that had moved her to tears. Through all of it, they learned each other's rhythms. Imani discovered that Declan got quiet when stressed, withdrawing into himself rather than talking through problems. She learned to recognize the signs, the tightness around his eyes, the way he'd pour himself into work, and she'd learned when to give him space and when to gently pull him back. Declan learned that Imani needed to process verbally, that her thinking out loud could sound like complaining but was actually her way of working through challenges. He learned to listen without immediately trying to fix things, to offer presence rather than solutions. They learned each other's triggers. Imani still tensed when Declan's phone rang with calls from his office, old fears of secrets and deception rising unbidden. Declan had learned to answer those calls on speaker when he was with her, offering transparency that slowly rebuilt trust. Declan struggled when Imani talked about her business challenges, his instinct to solve, problems with resources warring with his commitment to let her build independently. He'd learned to ask, "Do you want advice or just someone to listen?" before offering either. But perhaps the deepest growth happened in how they came together, not just physically though. That deepened too, but in the vulnerability they brought to their most intimate moments. In the darkness of their bedroom, with the city sounds filtering through open windows, they learned to be naked in ways that transcended the physical. Imani shared fears she'd never voiced, that she wasn't enough, that Declan would eventually want someone more sophisticated, more comfortable in his world of wealth and influence. "You're everything," he'd whisper against her skin, his hands gentle and reverent. "Exactly as you are." Declan confessed his own terrors, that he'd damaged their foundation too badly, that Imani was staying, out of obligation rather than desire, that he'd never fully earn back what his deception had cost. "I chose to stay," she'd remind him, her fingers tracing patterns across his shoulders. "I keep choosing you." Every single day, they learned to communicate desires and boundaries, to speak openly about what they needed, what felt good, what didn't. The conversations were sometimes awkward, often vulnerable, but they created a safety that made everything else possible. Physical intimacy became an extension of emotional honesty, moments where they could express things words couldn't capture. The tenderness in Declan's touch that said, "I'm sorry for hurting you." The way Imani would pull him closer that communicated, "I forgive you. I trust you. I'm here." There were nights of passion that left them breathless and laughing, and there were nights of quiet comfort, just holding each other, the connection no less profound for its gentleness. "I've never had this," Declan had admitted one night, his voice rough with emotion. "Had what?" "This feeling of being completely known and completely accepted. I spent so long hiding parts of myself, protecting myself. With you, I don't have to hide. You never have to hide with me," Imani had promised. One evening in late October, they sat on their back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The garden they'd been slowly rehabilitating was beginning to show signs of life. The roses Imani had planted were blooming. The herbs Declan had started were thriving. Imani felt a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly took her breath away. "What are you thinking about?" Declan asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Just how much has changed," Imani said softly. "A year ago, I was completely broken. I thought Marcus's betrayal had destroyed my ability to trust anyone. I made the most impulsive, reckless decision of my life because I was running from pain." "Regrets?" Declan asked quietly, and she could hear the vulnerability in the question. Imani turned to look at him, really look at him, at the man who'd seen her at her most reckless and met her there, the man who'd made terrible mistakes but owned them completely. The man who showed up every single day, doing the unglamorous work of rebuilding what his deception had damaged. No, she said, and meant it with her whole heart. Not regrets, just gratitude that we both chose to do the work. That we didn't let our wounds win. Declan kissed her forehead, and she felt him relax against her. I'm grateful too. For your courage, for your honesty. For giving us a real chance when you had every reason to walk away. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness crept across the sky, the first stars becoming visible above the city lights. Inside their home, boxes were still unpacked, paint colors needed choosing, a dozen small decisions awaited them. But out here, in this moment, everything felt exactly right. We did it, Imani said softly. Did what? Built something real. From the most unlikely beginning, we actually built something solid. We're still building, Declan corrected gently. Every day. I know, Imani agreed. And that's what makes it beautiful. It's not finished, it's not perfect, but it's ours, and it's real. A cool breeze rustled through the garden, carrying the scent of roses and possibility. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked, and children's laughter echoed from a nearby yard. Ordinary sounds, ordinary moments. And yet, sitting there with Declan's arms around her, watching the day transition into night, Imani felt anything but ordinary. She felt grateful. She felt seen. She felt home. The wounds from Marcus's betrayal had scarred over, no longer raw and bleeding. The hurt from Declan's deception had healed enough that she could touch it without flinching. The reckless decision to marry a stranger had transformed into the deliberate choice to build a life with a partner. Thank you, she said suddenly. For what? For being brave enough to take a chance on someone broken. For being strong enough to do the hard work when it would have been easier to give up. For seeing me, really seeing me, even when I couldn't see myself clearly. Declan tightened his arms around her. Thank you for giving us a real chance. For not running when you had every reason to. For teaching me what partnership actually means. As full darkness settled over their neighborhood, they remained on. The porch, wrapped in each other, and the life they were building. Neither of them knew that their balance was about to be tested again, that old ghosts would resurface, and new challenges would threaten the equilibrium they'd worked so hard to achieve. But in that moment, they had peace. And peace, they were learning, was worth fighting for. The networking event was Imani's idea, a mixer for black entrepreneurs and business owners, held at a sleek venue in Midtown Atlanta. Elevate Marketing was sponsoring the event, and Imani had spent weeks planning every detail, from the catering to the speaker lineup. She stood near the registration table in an emerald green dress that hugged her curves. Her natural hair styled in elegant twists, confidence radiating from her posture. This was her element. Now, not the woman who'd shrunk herself to fit someone else's expectations, but the entrepreneur who'd built something meaningful from the ground up. In the 6 months since launching her firm, she'd signed 12 clients, hired 2 part-time contractors, and earned enough to not just survive, but thrive. She was featured in a local business magazine last month, and 3 potential clients had reached out just this week. She was thriving, genuinely, undeniably thriving. Imani, this turnout is phenomenal, said Jeremiah, one of her clients who owned a chain of barbershops. You're really building something special here. We're building something special, Imani corrected with a smile. This community is what makes it work. She was mid-conversation with a potential client about their branding needs. When she felt it, that prickle of awareness that comes from being watched. She glanced across the room, and her breath caught. Marcus Wellington stood near the bar, a drink in his hand, staring directly at her. He looked different, smaller somehow, though his physical height hadn't changed. There was a tightness around his eyes, a slump to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. His suit was wrinkled, his hairline had receded slightly, and he had the appearance of someone who'd been weathered by circumstances he couldn't control. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and for a moment, Imani felt a ghost of the old pain, an echo of the devastation she'd felt walking into their apartment to find him with Shanice. But it was just an echo, distant, powerless. Marcus set down his drink and started walking toward her. Imani excused herself from her conversation, straightening her spine, watching him approach with the detachment one might observe a stranger. "Imani," he said when he reached her, and his voice carried that familiar tone that once would have made her heart race. Now, it just sounded tired. You look good. Really good." "Marcus." Her voice was flat, emotionless, giving him nothing. "I heard you started your own business," he continued, gesturing around the venue. "This is all you." "It is." "That's great. Really great. You always had the talent for it." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable under her steady gaze. "I also heard you got married." "I did." "Congratulations," he said, though the words sounded hollow. "I hope he treats you well." Imani didn't respond, just waited for him to get to whatever point had motivated him to approach her. Marcus took a breath, and she could see him gathering courage. "Look, Imani, I need to say this. I made a terrible mistake. What I did to you, what happened with Shanice, it was the worst decision of my life." "Okay," Imani said neutrally. "Things with her fell apart within a few months," Marcus continued, the words tumbling out faster now. "It was shallow and meaningless, and I realized too late what I'd thrown away. She wasn't you. No one is you, Imani. You were the real thing, and I was too stupid to see it." Imani felt nothing. No satisfaction at his admission, no vindication, no anger, just a mild curiosity about where he was going with this. "I've been thinking about you constantly," Marcus pressed on. "About us, about what we had, and I know I don't deserve it, but I was hoping maybe we could talk, maybe get coffee sometime. I just—" "Stop," Imani interrupted, her voice firm and clear. Marcus blinked. "I just want a chance to—" "Stop," she repeated, more forcefully this time. "Whatever you're about to say, don't—" "Imani, please, I know I hurt you, but I've changed. I understand now what I had. If you'd just give me a chance to—" "I said, stop, Marcus." Her voice carried the kind of authority she'd developed from running her own business, from negotiating with clients, from knowing her own mind. "I'm going to make this very clear, so listen carefully. I don't want to have coffee with you. I don't want to hear about your regrets or your realizations. I don't want any part of whatever reconciliation fantasy you've constructed." Marcus's face fell, but he tried again. "I understand you're angry." "I'm not angry," Imani cut him off. "I'm indifferent. There's a difference. You taught me something valuable, Marcus, and I'm actually grateful for it." "Grateful?" He looked confused. "You taught me exactly what I don't deserve," Imani explained, her voice steady and strong. "I don't deserve someone who only appreciates me after I'm gone. I don't deserve someone who makes me shrink my dreams to accommodate their insecurity. I don't deserve someone who treats my trust like it's disposable. But I see your worth now," Marcus said desperately, reaching toward her. Imani stepped back, and her expression was pure steel. "Now isn't good enough, Marcus. You had 5 years to see my worth. 5 years to honor my commitment, my sacrifice, my dedication. You chose not to. You chose Shanice. You chose betrayal. Those were your decisions, and you don't get to unmake them because they didn't work out the way you wanted. Everyone deserves a second chance," Marcus argued weakly. "Maybe," Imani agreed, "but not with me. And honestly, your opinion of my worth stopped mattering the day I walked out of that apartment. I know my value now, not because you finally recognized it, but because I recognized it in myself. So that's it?" Marcus's voice took on an edge of bitterness. "You're just going to throw away 5 years like it meant nothing?" "You threw away 5 years," Imani corrected coldly. "I'm just refusing to waste any more time on someone who didn't value what we had until it was gone. I'm married now, Marcus, to someone who's known my worth from day one. Someone who supports my dreams instead of asking me to diminish them. Someone who chooses me consistently, not just when it's convenient." She watched the realization settle over Marcus's face, the understanding that there was no opening here, no possibility, no chance of resurrection. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Imani said, and she meant it without malice or bitterness. "But you won't find it with me." "Excuse me, I have guests to attend to." She walked away without looking back, her head high, her steps steady. No dramatic exit, no emotional breakdown, just a woman who knew her value and refused to settle for anything less than she deserved. Behind her, Marcus stood alone in the crowded room, holding the pieces of a fantasy that had never been real. Imani didn't think about him for the rest of the event. That night, curled up on the couch with Declan in their living room, Imani told him about the encounter. She'd expected to feel something. Anxiety about his reaction, maybe, or residual pain from seeing Marcus. But she felt nothing except calm certainty. "How are you feeling?" Declan asked when she finished the story. Not angry, not jealous, just genuinely concerned about her emotional state. "Free," Imani said, and the word felt exactly right. "I thought seeing him might hurt, might bring everything back. But it didn't. It just made me grateful." Grateful. Declan's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Grateful for what we have," Imani explained. "Grateful that his betrayal pushed me toward something real instead of keeping me trapped in something hollow. Grateful that I know the difference now between someone who wants to possess me and someone who wants to partner with me." Declan was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her arm. "You're remarkable, you know that?" "We're remarkable," Imani corrected, tilting her head to look at him. "Look at what we've built. Look at how far we've come from two broken people making a reckless decision to reckless decisions that turn into real partnerships," Declan said softly, kissing the top of her head. Imani smiled against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. To doing the work that makes reckless decisions worthwhile. Outside, Atlanta's evening sounds filtered through their windows, traffic and distant music and the ordinary chaos of the city. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they had peace. The chapter with Marcus was finally completely closed. And Imani had closed it herself, with strength she'd built, with confidence she'd earned, with clarity she'd fought for. She was free, and that freedom felt like coming home. But life has a way of testing us right when we think we've figured it all out. Just when Imani and Declan have found their balance, when trust has been rebuilt, when everything finally feels secure, life is about to test them in ways they never imagined. Part 3 is waiting for you right now. Don't stop now. Click the link in the description or tap the card on your screen to watch Part 3 immediately. But before you go, like this video if Imani's growth inspired you, if her strength in facing Marcus showed you what closure really looks like, comment below. What was your favorite moment from Part 2? Was it the confrontation with Declan? The therapy sessions? Or Imani walking away from Marcus without looking back? Subscribe if you haven't already, because stories like this, real, messy, transformative stories, are what this channel is all about. See you in Part 3.